Dear fellow countrymen,
Our country has faced more than 3 centuries of oppression and capitalization of foreign countries who took our lands, given our ancestors fake certificates for our grounds, and broke their backs with inhumane labor. This not only broke the hearts of the Filipino people, but also everything else valuable on the land.
But that was a long, long time ago.
The point being is, the country had these problems back then, and now that we are a free country, nobody knew what to do with this land. So, the government intervened and created this system called Agrarian.
Agrarian reform, in essence, is the rectification and the reorganization of the whole system of agriculture.
Go!
It is handled by the government redistributing land to farmers, relieving oppressed workers from the shackles of their unjust landlords, basically removing the monopoly system in the land ownership.
Agrarian reforms has different types of measures, few of which are integration of the land and training to farmers, securing farmers' rights and ensuring the rights of peasants working on this land and the like.
Okay, so altogether, agrarian reform was farmers' key to the next level living. Can I go to sleep now?
land reform, on the other hand, is simpler, but it's not as effective as the agrarian reform.
It works as a tenure system or redistribution of land, therefore making it under agrarian reform. But at the same time, it makes it synonymous to agrarian reform, whose aim is to provide change not only in farmer-land relationship, but also with the system altogether, therefore promoting a smooth sailing agrarian culture. Thank you.
Because we didn't really begin with oppression. Back before the Spaniards came, there was a system of stewardship and equality on the usage of and products of land. Think lolos and lolas about how they only asked for fruit and vegetables back in their day.
Then the Spaniards came, of course.
Below agriculture, every Christianized native family is given 4 to 5 hectares of land to cultivate, but they cannot share crops per class or landless class.
Kailangan ba i-filter yung...
The native families were just landowners, not owners.
Okay, so technically, the land was owned by the Spanish king. And so, they paid their colonial tributes to the Spanish authorities by the agricultural products they produced.
So rude, oh my god!
Is this the start of agricultural tendency?
Ladies and gentlemen, yes, the start of agricultural tendency were with friar lands for the religious orders, repartimientos that were rewards to Spanish military, and the baddest wolf, encomienda.
Encomienda were large tracts of land managed by encomiendero, and the natives who lived in the land did not have rights to the land.
Eventually, the crops were introduced to the world market of export.
But there was a problem. Some encomienderos abused the natives by collecting more tributes which became somewhat rentals. The natives had to sell the crops at very low prices, or else the crops would be confiscated and then the encomienderos would resell them at higher prices.
Other than that, they had to render service to the encomenderos as a form of respect. Hey, watch it! You can eat it! You can eat it!
Stealing our lands? El filibusterismo!
In 1865, there was a law that said people had to register their lands.
But only a few knew about this, and so other people claimed other people's lands because other people were not informed of other people registering their lands, and so other people took other people's lands.
Peasant families were driven away of their homes they lived for centuries. Or worse, they were forced to become tillers.
By the time the Americans came, they realized that the land problems caused by many other problems, revolts, and violence. So they passed several bills to distribute the land ownership.
The Philippine Bill of 1902 stated that a private individual can own up to 16 hectares, while a corporate land holdings can avail of 1,024 hectares. This meant Americans could also join the party of owning land.
But around 400,000 farmers did not have titles to their lands. So the torrent system of land registration came to be. It is the system of recording land titles with a court-issued certificate upon application by the landowner.
The torrent system invented by Sir Robert Torrance, in which he is a 19th century reformer of Australian land laws, is a land registration system in which the government is the keeper of all land, all title records, and the land title serves as a certificate of full, indefeasible, and valid ownership.
So they might have thought they fixed the problem, but they didn't. Land ownership was still for the rich and able.
Despite the system introduced by the Americans, there was a growing wealth gap between the landlords and the tenants. Some became ghosts. They were always absent. So the haciendas became poorly managed, and an average peasant farmer could not depend on cultivating land for his livelihood. Adding to that, the tenants and the farmers had to pay fines, taxes, usury, despite the low selling price of rice.
The landlords became very rich, while the tenants were deprived of their rights. There was rampant uprising.
Immediately.
Even with the eminent fact that this is where World War II comes out to play, this is where the Japanese era and its downfall, there was a steady flow of Philippine presidents contributing bit by bit to the agrarian reform.
Almost each president contributed to the betterment of the land. To cite some examples,
President José Macapagal was called the father of agrarian reform. He passed Republic Act 3844, the most comprehensive piece of agrarian reform legislation ever intended for the country. But the problem was it did not have enough funding to be fulfilled.
President Ferdinand Marcos passed the Presidential Decree number 27, which meant that tenantated lands of rice and corn can pass their ownership to the tenants and lowered the ceiling land holdings to 7 hectares. This was to lift poverty. Thank you, Marcos!
About agrarian reform, the Presidential Decree number 27 was remarkable because it was passed during the martial law without legislative process, and it was the only law in the Philippines that was handwritten. But we should remember that during the martial law, several farmers were also put into arrest without any due process.
Under President Corazon Aquino, there was Proclamation 131, the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, or more commonly known as CARP, and Executive Order 405, which assigned the Land Bank of the Philippines the primary responsibility in land valuation function.
For President Joseph Estrada, there was magkabalikat pa sa kaunlarang agraryo o magkasaka to encourage investors to the countryside. And on President Gloria Arroyo, there was bayanihan, which stood for bayan, and anihan.
Many laws and so many presidents, but let's go back to Ms. Aquino's CARP.
Under President Corazon Aquino, RA 6657, more popularly known as the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program, was implemented to redistribute land from owners to tenants, lies in its comprehensiveness. It covers practically all agricultural and fishery lands above 5 hectares, public or private regardless of crop or tenure, unlike the Presidential Decree 27, which include only rice and corn lands.
Again, improvements are the best parts of changing a country.
But the legal basis for CARP is the Republic Act number 6657, also known as the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law, or CARL, signed by President Corazon C. Aquino on June 10, 1988. It is an act which aims to promote social justice and industrialization, providing the mechanism for its implementation and for other purposes.
Keyword: social justice.
Because that's the whole point of reform, to provide relief to the oppressed.
And so, the biggest question is, if social justice was given like an agrarian reform.
So, was it?
Answer is yes, and is greatly highlighted by the CARP.
Currently, Department of Agrarian Reform is the lead implementing agency of Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program. They handle land tenure improvement, development of programs, land surveys, land acquisition, distribution, and management studies.
The leaders in providing support services to farmer beneficiaries and promoting the development of viable agrarian reform communities.
So, the implementation of the CARP is also the greatest model of the exercise of the state's power of eminent domain, private property for public use, the goal of agrarian reform.
Wait, hold up. Private properties for public use? Isn't that like stealing from private owners?
No, eminent domain is an inherent power of the state not necessarily embodied in the Constitution. It is for the purpose of limiting an otherwise unlimited power.
But it's not just private property converted to public property. By law, it must be for public use, and a just compensation is due to the private owner. Don't touch my birdie.
For example, Manuel Rojas bought 8,000 hectares of lands from the Ayala Sobel family and sold them to the landless farmers. In an unfortunate turn, they had to resell it because of lack of support facilities. Oops.
Even though they had problems with the corporate implementation, such as land conversion, lack of funding, and unproductivity of land, either due to inefficiency or insufficient knowledge of land management, CARP is now an integrated part of the Philippine system.
And to sum it all up, agrarian reform is making the land system in the Philippines better than it ever was, and that's what really matters.
We might have talked too much blah 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 information overload, so for those of you who didn't watch, didn't pay attention, it's boring, it's a video presentation. Here's a recap.
The Philippines is a bountiful haven of natural resources, and our most abundant is land.
Reform paved the way to own, register, and manage these lands upon justified means.
Possible erase the stigma brought about by foreigners truly taking over.
It's been a problem and solution process that has been going on since the beginning.
But by repeated revisions and troubleshooting of the agrarian reform, we can prevent any injustices, especially to our hardworking farmers. And so, our dear fellow countrymen,
That is
The Agrarian.
The Agrarian Reform.
Agrarian reform.
agrarian reform.
That's agrarian reform.